Hi, the notorious skeptic here. I know we're all very upset about the fact that the president decided to nuke one of Canada's cities, but what I'm still concerned with is how many sex abuse scandals suddenly came to light both from Hollywood and from the political establishment, which is ironic because they often love to whine about women's rights and to accuse all men of being rapists, but now it turns out that many feminist heroes and many left-wing heroes have turned out to be sexual abusers themselves. Obviously, this is a tradition going back to even before Bill Clinton. Just look at Ted Kennedy. Look up a certain incident involving him and a car and a lake. But what I especially think is interesting is that sexual abuse since the early 2000s has often been used as a political tool against conservatives, specifically against the Catholic Church, where the media disproportionately focused on the Catholic Church to pretend as though it was a specific problem within Catholicism, redirecting attention from similar abuse in more liberal churches, in public schools, and within Hollywood. And now we can see that it happens just as much within Hollywood, but it's still often used as a weapon against those with conservative morals and sexual ethics, which I think is incredibly hypocritical. And I also think it's wrong that only abuse victims of Catholic priests are taken seriously, and not those of Hollywood. Now, this is finally starting to change, and I think that's a very positive development. But what I think is fascinating is how little is still being done, that no arrests have been made, and how long it took. It really does seem as though the secular elite within Hollywood and within Washington is still getting a free pass. And I think that's completely outrageous. I also think how the rape victims of Bill Clinton were silenced was completely outrageous. And I especially think it's disgusting how arbitrarily Trump was accused of sexual abuse after that whole Hollywood Access Bus tape thing came to light. But what I thought was rather weird was that he clearly described that he was trying to flirt with women and that he made moves on them, that sometimes it failed, and that he also described that they let him do it, yet that it was still described as abuse. Now, if a woman lets you do it because they're intimidated, because you're in a position of power with them, that obviously constitutes harassment, but if they let you do it because you're famous, it does seem to mean that they consent. That is generally what they let you do it means. So how Trump could be accused of rape because he openly said that he made sexual advances on women that they agreed to, I still don't really get. But I think it's kind of weird to try to turn that into rape while actual rape incidents are still being covered up. On another note, I also still think it's ridiculous to read people complain that the Catholic Church would support genocide in Africa because of their opposition to birth control. I've always just found that to be weird, and even my ex-Catholic father told me that was weird when I was little, and he wasn't exactly supportive of the church, but he told me it was weird because when you think about it, the only people who would follow Catholic teachings on birth control are those who will just remain abstinent and will not practice things like bigamy or sex outside of marriage and who don't need them. People who will disregard Catholic teachings on sex outside of marriage would just as easily disregard Catholic teachings on birth control. So it just seems very odd. The Catholic Church follows one approach, that of complete abstinence, and if people follow that, there will be no STDs. And the liberal left supports the use of birth control if you decide to be promiscuous, which, if you use the birth control when you're promiscuous, will also be effective. So it seems as though the only way that STDs can spread is when people, on the one hand, behave promiscuously, but on the other hand, don't use birth control, which I wouldn't suspect are people who listen to the Catholic bishops, because they wouldn't be promiscuous in the first place. It would more likely be men who just don't like the way condoms feel, which, let's face it, is still an issue, and that makes them total pigs. Now, if the Catholic Church would say it were okay to have sex outside of marriage without using a condom, I can imagine that being an issue. But they're a bunch of prudes, and yeah, they have their own approach, and you can argue that it's unrealistic. I can imagine that. But so I don't see how it would affect anyone who doesn't follow all of the teachings and doesn't remain abstinent. So I don't see what harm it can do. And statistics have actually shown that the more Catholic countries in Africa have AIDS decrease a lot faster, where a number of the more secular liberal countries have AIDS increasing, like South Africa, Botswana and Kenya have it a lot more. Compare this to more conservative Catholic areas like Mozambique, and it seems very strange that people claim that there would be such a correlation between Catholic condemnation of birth control and the spread of AIDS, because you would expect Catholic countries in Africa to then have the most AIDS, which they don't. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean you have to agree with Catholic teachings on birth control, or that you can't find them completely and utterly silly and ridiculous. You obviously have that right, but it just to me never made sense to claim that Catholics teaching that you should just be chaste would somehow spread AIDS, because the people who can't live up to that probably won't live up to the other rules regarding birth control either. It's just kind of a package. You can accept all of it or reject all of it, and liberals have generally done the latter, so I don't really see the issue. To me, it just seems to be needlessly politicizing something, and to also say that by opposing a measure others see as good in fighting unhealthy behavior makes you guilty of genocide, I think is ridiculous. It's like saying that when you support smoking, you're guilty of genocide. Once you start claiming that indirectly supporting something that might cause people to die is the same as genocide, that really cheapens the meaning of genocide. It's like saying that if you support the right to alcohol, you're supporting genocide, or when you support the right to fat foods. To me, it just completely cheapens the meaning of that word, just as the term rape is overused, and let's not even begin about the word fascist and how it's overused. But so yeah, I just think it's been a crazy couple of months with all of the sex abuse scandals suddenly coming to light, yet with Hollywood having made a film that promotes pederasty. Yikes. So yeah, this is a strange period indeed. But what I think we can indeed take out of this is that people are holding their leaders more and more accountable, and hopefully this is a trend we can see continue. Hopefully pedophilia and rape and all sexual misconduct in general will be more actively fought, and there will be a stronger public awareness. And hopefully it will no longer be used as a political tool to either attack opponents on the right or on the left. And hopefully we can stop denying the suffering of victims who suffered from politicians of our own side. Hopefully Republicans can care about victims of Republican politicians, and Democrats can care about victims of Democratic politicians. So yeah, that's my skeptical analysis of this, and thank you for allowing me to waste a couple of minutes of your time. Bye.